Okay, we have Alex in the house. Hello, Alex. You in semi-ironic and emotionally recuperative attendance. Good to hear it. Alex was offering me bags of cash earlier today. Unmarked bills. That and some moon dust. I'm not exactly sure what moon dust is, Alex. You'll have to clarify. Is that a drug paraphernalia? I'm not sure what it is. Okay. Let me see. We've got... How many people have we got looking? How do I see it again here? I can't see exactly. What's on the schedule? Well, I was hoping to do a little extra bit on the empiricism debate between like Cockshot and Kleiman on the validity of Cockshot, Shike, and all these people's results. Now, unfortunately, I didn't get enough red. I was hoping to get more red today. Let me just put on a pair of socks. Getting cold here. I was hoping to get more red today because it's a good few years since I've read the papers to make so that I could explain it as well as I could. But let's see if I can wing it. I had a go last night of reading some stuff, but with this stuff, you like I read some of the paper and then there'll be some point I'll get snagged on, not so much snag, but I'll go, oh, that's kind of interesting, and then I go off down a rabbit hole and get waylaid. But I was looking at two papers last night, both some of chapter 11 of Reclaiming Capital, and also a paper by Kleiman called let's get it out of the index here. It was a 2004 paper called Spurious Value, Price Correlations, Some Additional Evidence and Arguments. That and a 2002 one called The Law of Value and Law of Statistics, Sectoral Values and Prices in the US Economy. And finally, just this evening, just before I came on, to have a look at 2005 Reply to Cockshot and Cottrell. So let's see if I can get into maybe some of the general ideas. Well, we discussed the last two times. Let's see what Alex is saying in the chat here. Yeah, moon dust is a really fancy angel's dust PCP that the Nazis on the dark side of the moon make in their bioengineering floral human anus hybrids. Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah, that is what I meant. Okay. So thanks for that one, Alex. Marquez, Perez, Muniz, Diaz, Puras, Thauro. French one thrown in at the end. Is that it, Alex, like your long second name? Is that your real one? Like, is that how, like, you know, Spanish people traditionally would, like, they would have like their mother and their father's and their grandparents' names. If you were to say their formal name, it would go on forever down through the ages. I assume that's kind of why your name is so long, or maybe it's just a piss take. Let me know in the chat. Thoreau, like the famous author. I never heard of Thoreau. Heard of Thoreau, but not Thoreau. Yeah, I don't know what's coming up. Okay, yeah, his name braided by paternity. Yeah, there you go. Okay, let's have a so a little recap on the bit that we talked about the last time. We talked, there was two problems with the analysis as done. One of them was a problem of aggregation. Let's see now if I can find the graph. We'll just throw up a simple graph to talk through these lads, and then I can share the screen now. Okay, let me share this over here. Share my screen. Oh, there's Robert. Hey, Robert, how's it going? Robert's in the chat. Yeah. Okay, so we had this problem of aggregation. So this is where we see here where when we sum across all these different things in a sector. So in the corn sector, we have a cornflake factory, a corn wholesaler, and a corn farmers, and they all have very different distributions of constant capital and variable capital. So they have different organic compositions of capital. Yet, when you sum a sector together, you are likely to have a sample of that will be probably pretty representative of different organic compositions of capital. Because within a sector, there'll be certain low and high labor heavy components in certain branches of a sector. And when you conglomerate these, you will likely be seeing this effect here. While even though there's a lot of noise individually, if we look at the differences between prices and values here of the output, that when you sum them, you will end up clumping them together and averaging over them. So that's one problem you have. You have an aggregation problem. And the second problem you have is controlling for the same, a common third factor. So when we're really interested in analyzing to see if the new labor that we're putting in is that the price that's been added on top of our cost corresponding to the amount of extra labor we're putting through. So if we look here, this is like the steel sector, right? And we've got our value and price of output, okay, for this steel sector. Now, if we look at what's in common to the value and the price, so this blue one here is the price and this red one is the value, we can see that they're both made up of constant capital cost, variable capital cost, and then their output will be a surplus. Yeah, the price will be like a markup, okay? And the markup on their costs, does that correlate with the surplus labor performed? That's what we're really interested in. Now, Kleiman has showed that when you control for these costs, that the correlation that we see, like here between, like, you know, where's the graph? The correlation here between total value and our price and our prices disappears. Okay, so that the extra new labor that's being performed is not it's the amount of markup that the firms do is not highly correlated like the claim is to the extra labor done. So the markup, that extra bit of markup, is not correlated to the extra labor. Okay, that it's all over the shop. Okay, now so Cockshot goes on to make what I think is a complex argument. Okay, as to why this is not correct. Let's have a look at a graph. Now, this is from his video here that he's put together. So he makes this point here about, so let me full screen this one so we can look at the points that Cockshot tries to make just from the slides he has here. So he's going to talk about this idea here. So the idea here was, I think, of, you know, the number of crimes committed dependent So here, the study the effect of alcohol consumption and crime in cities. Okay. Now, if you've got a big city like full of alcos like Glasgow, and they've got crime, and then you compare that to a small city like, I don't know, Dunfermline or something, and you were to compare the number of crimes, so what you would see that there is a big link between the amount of alcohol consumed and the number of crimes. But Glasgow is 10 times the size of Dunfermline. Okay, or or some other place. So what really is going on there is that you're seeing a lot of crime and a lot of boozing, right? But actually, what you're missing out is that actually you got to control for the number of people. Okay, so when you take all of the is Dunfermline actually a city in Scotland? Another football club. That's Dunfermline. How do you spell it? Dunfermline is a town, yeah. Okay, it's 50,000 people. There we go. So if Dunfermline, like, if you control for the size of the actual city, so the population, and then you find that you might find that there's no correlation then between the amount of alcohol consumed and the number of crimes, or you might find that there still is a one still there. Okay. So you must control for the size of the population, the amount of population in there to get a true idea of it. Now, so that's like what Coxer calls a confounding variable. Now, then he goes on to this other kind of variable, like what he says is a mediating variable. So what he does here, he's trying to look about the links between like being female and your income. Okay, so let's see the graph here that explains it well. So here he has, this is I think taken from Denmark. So we have male and a female without kids. Without kids is the light gray, and female with kids so this is their earnings. Okay, so we see that up until the point where people have a child, essentially, then their income for the women goes down. And alternatively, if they don't have a child, their income goes up, and it tracks with men. Okay, so if we were to actually control for childbirth and only compare women with men, so women who don't have children with men, we might actually see, well, look, the pay for these two groups of people is okay once you control for childbirth. But by controlling for childbirth, you're actually taking out a key component of what it means to be a woman. Okay, and like you're stripping away a layer of understanding that actually means something. Okay, that if you're controlling for that, you're essentially not seeing what happens in the real world to women. Okay, so this child rearing, if you were to control for, this is a mediating variable. So the variable you're controlling for would be destroying some element that is key to the what you're trying to measure, the difference you're trying to measure. Okay. And then he goes on to make some claims that this is not clear. This argument to me is not clear. Him making a case that the costs are a mediating variable. I just do not understand how that could make any sense. Like if we're literally trying to measure the added bit, okay, the extra added bit of cost markup and comparing that to value performed, to added surplus value with the cost, the markup, the price markup. Okay, it is unclear to me how the costs could in any way be a mediating variable. Could you say that? Like if we were to think that put it this way, let's assume that it is a mediating variable. That would mean that if the correlation is getting reduced when we're taken out of it, that there is something inherently skewing about costs in a systemic way, okay? In a systemic way that would negate the lack of correlation when you control for it. Now that's a complicated thing to get your head around. Okay, so what possibly could cause the correlation to disappear if you control for cost? Like, what is the thing is, there are mediating variables, but you have to make your case for why it's a mediating variable. Like, what is the possible reason why, if you control for costs like Kleiman does, that is negating something fundamental? And to me, I can't understand what it could be. Like, from my understanding, if I have the understanding correct, like, if the correlation, once you do that control, is gone, okay, that would mean that it would be systemically removing a real effect by taking out costs. And like, what possible effect to negate what you're measuring about a surplus and a markup by reducing cost? What possible difference could it make? You know, I don't see it. I really there's not a clear answer to that. And not only this, Cockshot goes on to make a claim that that the manner that which Kleiman controls for cost is incorrect, okay, and that when he does it a slightly different way, okay, and he does his costing slightly differently, instead of so he controls for cost a different way, okay, and instead of getting a correlation, getting the correlation disappear, it's still there. It drops to 71% correlation, but it's still there. This is on the UK sector profit against surplus value. Now, this is where things get extremely messy. Okay, there is a series of papers that are flying around here. Let's see if we can get one up, which I think this is a pretty devastating critique. Okay, so let's open this bad boy here and let me share it. Okay, so keep in mind here, the Cockshot's after saying that there is, even when he controls for costs in a different way than Kleiman does, he still gets a correlation even though it's weakened. Okay, now Kleiman is like a dog with a bone when you get him going on this stuff. So let's have a look here and see what happens. Now, if we have a look here, we do see that it's that this is imputed surplus value. So in this simulation, I assume that this is I'm pretty sure that this is a response to the paper that Cockshot is quoting here, showing this correlation, which I do have to check. Assuming that's true, inside of that there are some imputed, there's some calculations about simulating results when Cockshot and Cottrell do it. So Cockshot and Cottrell, I think, are making up some data to do their test, to perform their test, but in a place where they, so let's read the actual statement. Let's see if I can find a bit here. Well, basically, there's a simulation of data that they do, and Cockshott and Contrell say that the simulation data that they've created thus shows this correlation. I have to check that up. This is why I didn't get it all done today. But from what I remember reading previously, it shows that actually Kleiman shows mathematically that what they've done to simulate the data has actually, instead of being random, has a correlation in there. Okay, so the only correlation that they're actually showing is the correlation of the simulated data that they made. And he not only that though, but like Kleiman actually proves deductively, not from an actual, there's a mathematical proof in one of these papers whereby that if the original correlation that Cockshott and Cottrell and Scheich and these guys said was true, that if that was a real, then it would also, by definition, by logical proof, not a statistical analysis, by a logical proof, that if it exists in the one that is not yet controlled for costs, and then you control for costs, it will still be there. Okay, and that's a logical deductive proof. And when we go and we check, when we actually control for cost the way, which is totally reasonable, this whole thing disappears. Now, this one here, where Cockshott says he has this from 1998, and this is, I think this uses imputed variables. Hello, Precious, what do you want in live? There you go. Excuse me, but so this correlation, as far as I'm aware, I need to check it. This is why I wanted to check before today. I wanted to get a bit more reading done. But this correlation here is based on imputed, some kind of model data, and that inside in the data that they use the model, or the mathematics for creating their data, they basically built in a correlation in their model. So what the correlation they're seeing is basically by coming from how they actually created their sampled data. So that's pretty goddamn devastating. And it's not a statistical analysis proof. It's a logical deductive proof. Now, what does Alex say? So that's the general gist. Like, it's kind of painful, like dealing with these. Alex has a point here. He says it's really sad to see how much human time and energy has been having wasted debunking this. Nimwads at best. Yeah. What the hell is a Nimwad? I am so I'm too old. A Nimwad, people with authoritarian views, agendas, or personalities rarely describe themselves as authoritarian. A foolish or stupid person. Why the hell was it coming up with that crazy stuff? Okay, so yeah, like it really is. And like when you get into the thick, when you really get into the weeds with this stuff, and you try and take Cockshott and seriously, and his arguments seriously, and the counter arguments of others, I must say it's like it's kind of disappointing, to be honest with you. Like there seems to be an awful lot of misrepresentation from Cockshott, and not from Kleiman having done all the hard work and reading, I still want to finish and finally get my head properly around this. So it's very disappointing. There's so much rubbish out there when it comes to Marxist economics. There are so many people with their own very motivated reasons for certain interpretations that are, way off the mark many times. This idea that like volume 3 of Capital, that Marx is incoherent with volume 1 and 2, when it's so obvious with anybody who gets into the weeds with it, it's so obvious that what Cockshott is trying to represent is a mishmash misrepresentation. So the reason why Cockshott and these don't like volume 3 of Capital is because in volume 1 and 2, Marx basically sets up the idea, just for analysis purposes, that values and prices are the same thing. Okay. And when he gets to volume 3, he says, okay, now we're going to look at the real world. We said before, we know values and prices aren't the same, but now we're going to, we set them equal to each other just for the purposes of building up our model to understand there's some elements. Now let's add back in the real world element and say prices and value aren't the exact same, and let's see what happens, and let's explain the system in the real world now out of this idealized abstraction that we wanted just for purposes of scientific investigation. Now, this kind of statistical analysis of stuff that shows prices equals values, that they're correlated so highly. So what does that mean? So we have Cockshott will come along and he'll say, well, look, volume 1 and 2 they were right, where Marx said that, and volume 3, well, that's rubbish. We can throw that out. And really, Marx had a theory of volume 1 and 2, and he went wrong with the third part, but 1 and 2, yeah, they're great. And that's just like, if you're making that case, right? If you're making that case, you've got to have these stats water fucking tight, right? They got to be watertight. Like, you're actually saying this whole element that makes, well, not only does it make sense, that describes the real world better, the idea that values and prices aren't the same. That was the initial transformation problem in economics that caused the fall of classical economics. They couldn't explain this. Well, Marx explained it, but by then you're not going to go along with Marx's explanation. But that was a big, big area of concern for theorists at the time. They couldn't explain this transformation problem using a labor theory of value. But if you're going to throw out all that good stuff based on these stats, right, these statistical results, which really don't stand up, you're making a huge error. And it's hard, when I read through these papers, it is hard to defend what Cockshott and Cottrell and them are doing. That it would seem to me that it's I like sometimes people, they do a body of work and then they defend it even when they know it's wrong. So that does happen. But also what happens as well is that people have ulterior motives for certain types of theories. Yeah. And, so who knows what's going on. And certainly I think, there's quite a level of skullduggery in some of the argumentation. Some of the argumentation is not up to a high standard. Was volume 3 actually finished? Volume 3 was finished. Yeah. Marx, before he died, Marx considered his work on Capital to be completed. And then he went off and doing his anthropological works. That was in, if people want to, I think I would recommend that Gary Teeple book on Marx's critique of politics. I think it's excellent. He makes the case that Marx actually didn't. He thinks that Marx actually wasn't interested in doing a theory of the state. That he thought that that really what was required was the theory of the that his initial plan to do a theory on the state was essentially settled, and that I'm being incoherent here. I'm tired. But basically, that he didn't need to write a one on the theory of the state. That he thought that he had sufficiently covered stuff in Capital, which I think, when it was argued in the book, I found this argument very convincing. But you'd have to read the book yourself to deduce that. I've also been hypercomputing Marx with respect to transformation in the context of the older. Oh, Jesus. That's too much. What do you call it? Yeah, so I think so that's what was I going to say? I was going to say something. It's gone. Who's in the chat then? We've got 5 people watching. I'm being quite incoherent here. We've got Robert and we got Alex. If anybody else is in the chat, give me a shout out. Anything anybody wants me to discuss today. I've kind of done a lot of this stuff to death. I didn't get to do this one as well as I wanted today. But suffice it to say is that, like, when you control for the cost, mathematically, if the initial correlation was true, it should be in the controlled one, and it's not. And if you're to go and make the case that you're removing a mediating variable, like removing the fact that women go and have children and you're controlling that out, you have to make the case for why it's a mediating variable. And there is no convincing case for mediating variable. And Cockshott then goes on to ignore the deductive proof, like a mathematical proof saying that if one is correlated, the other should be correlated. Then goes on to do costs, go to do controlling for costs in his own way, slightly different way. There's different ways you can control for these things. He says the correlation is reduced, it still exists. But when Kleiman goes in and analyzes the mathematics for how they simulated some of the necessary data in there, he finds out that the correlation was in the simulated data. Okay, so that's like fucking devastating. Not only does it not hold with the mathematical proof, the deductive proof that says if it's uncontrolled and then it's controlled, that the correlations will still remain. Not only does it disappear then, but when they say, "Oh no, you're controlling the wrong way," and when you go and look at the math of how they made up some of these imputed values in their data, you find out that their simulation stuff is correlated, and the correlation is jumping out of their simulated data. So like, they're just devastating critiques. I have to make sure, if I'm not correct that this stuff is the one that Kleiman is saying that it was correlated, I will come back and correct it. But as far as I can see, it is just devastating, devastating critiques. Okay. Christopher, how's it going? So they're talking about Kleiman's podcast, MHI podcast, which is called Radio Free Humanity, I think. The economic stuff in it is really excellent. There was a brilliant 2-part series on the value form, where he debated like a kind of a very well-respected value form guy called, is it Charles Murray, I think it is. And it was really, really excellent. And you had 2 people, experts in their fields with different viewpoints, really in a good nature thing, arguing it out, really at a high level. I thought it was really, really excellent. And I think when you listen to it, there's kind of really one key, I think there's 2. In the first episode, there's a major point, and then there's the second episode. There's a major point. The first one was like that. So the value formers think that they have this like co-constitutive theory of value, whereby they say that the after production, you have your product, your shoe, your coat, or whatever that you've made, that there is like a potential value in there, and that it's only in the sale where it actually, the value actually gets realized. And Andrew would say, like, and would say that Marx and the TSSI says that no, like the value is in the object when you've made it, okay, but you don't know what it is until you go to market, okay. So this is a distinction between ontology and epistemology. One is of being, like there is value in that shoe, yeah. And then when you go to market, you learn what it is, how much it is. So one is of being, and then knowledge about the being, you know. So so it's an ontological, epistemological kind of divide. You know, I think that's absolutely key to understanding why the TSSI is good versus these value form people, where they basically mystify the market and to some sense say the market adds value or takes away value. You know, it'll change the price, but it won't change the value inherent in the object. Now, what was I going to say? Yeah, like if you only have to think about, like, say for example, say I'm a factory, shoe factory, and today I make my I sell some of my stuff in the shop, and what do I, you know, lots of times I have unsold stock, and if you look in the books of a firm in their unsold stock, like what did they put their, you know, how accounting wise would you actually register it, you know, in your accounts? You would put it in as like having value. You don't put it in as potential value. You put it in as value. You know, you would put it in at book price. You know, you mark, you know, what price is in the market today. This unsold stock I have in my things goes in as a, you know, monetary equivalent. You put it in the books as. You don't have to sell it for it to have that value. That's from an accounting point of view. Okay, we're going to Alpha Omega episode on econophysics. Yeah, I have bought the bloody Laws of Chaos, Emmanuel Farjun and Mackover. I've showed this one before, and literally I haven't read more than like the intro because I haven't had time to it. But that's one on the reading group series I'd like to do, but maybe not for a while. I think like there are some real problems with it. Like I think it has initially the big problem that Puya was saying, like he read, you know, a few pages of it, and let me just see if I have is it ergodic? I want to make sure if this is the distribution. Let's see if it's in this. I want to get the right. I can't remember if ergodic was the word. Let me just check here for a second. No, I don't understand those definitions, so I'll have to come back to it. But from what I remember, whatever the word was, is that they said that to measure a single firm, okay, a firm's performance, say average profit rate. Let's just say profit rate, okay. Not saying this is precisely what they said in there, but this was the problem essentially, that their profit rate, okay, for the term for a firm over time. So let's say you're Ford, you're making cars, you know, your profit rate, how it distributes, whether it goes up or down, and your values over say the next 50 years, okay, from 1940 to 1990, that the profit rate distribution over that time period is the same as the distribution of all firms' profits in 1940. Okay, so what does that mean? It's a kind of a strange assumption to make. This is an assumption I think that you make from statistical mechanics. So the idea is that you have a box of gas, and you say maybe the velocity of an atom in that box of gas, okay, over time is so it'll be knocked by an atom, and it'll go faster, and it'll be hit by another one, it'll go slower, and blah 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 blah. And all these interactions, you'll say that over time, the speed, if you were to map a graph the speed of this atom over like an hour, you would see that it would be kind of, say for example, normally distributed. And you would say, well, actually, if you were to compare that distribution to the distribution of the speeds of all the atoms at the very start, you would say, actually, the two distributions are the same. Now, why is that wrong for economics? Well, the falling rate of profit. Okay? The reason you can't say the profit rate for, say, Ford over the following 50 years is the same as the distribution of all the profit rates of all the companies in 1940, say, is that the profit rate for all the companies is going down. Okay? So that idea of the profit rates of all the companies is not just a static. It's not like the average profit rate stays at 15% or 22% or whatever. It's actually going down. So the normal distribution of the profit rates over time is, getting squished and maybe squashed out or narrowed in. Who knows? But it's changing over time. So to make deductions based on this, I think the term was ergodic, but it has, there's some mathematical definitions there, but I don't know. But so you can see that they're trying to look at how random atoms work in a gas box where everything is random and all these fluctuations will cancel out. But what we have in capitalism is a driving force that's pushing that distribution away from just being constantly, static. It's, it is like measuring. If we think about a cube of air here in front of me, and there's no draft in the room, and it's all just sitting there and it's jumbling, it's probably fine. But if I open this goddamn window and there's a draft coming through here, if I slowly and gradually open the window, the distribution of all the atoms in here and the energy involved in it will change over time. And so the profit rate, organic composition of capital, is like opening the window. You're opening the goddamn window, and you can't use that statistical mechanic approach. Not that one. You might have to use one that's much more difficult to mathematically model and give you different results. So I think that's correct. I think you're right there. But kurtosis. I did watch another one. There's another one of the cockshock crew. So there's three kind of cockshock crew people that I've had interactions with. There's Ian Wright as well on Twitter, and then there's Dave Zachariah. But Ian Wright gave a talk about econophysics to the CPGB party this year in their Communist University, and I think that it was it's hard to know. I thought there was, you see, the problem with doing modeling is that you can model things and you can get similar outputs. So from differing model starting points, you can get output distributions that are reasonably similar. Okay, and that in that talk, he tried to measure two two things he tried to measure. One was, I think, just the marketplace producing certain outcomes, and then he tried to model the wage relation, the class dynamic, and trying from these two kind of components of the model to see what the outputs were from this model. And it seemed to me that the market, the way he modeled the market was, incredibly flawed, and just shows you that, like, you can have two components, A and B, in a model, and they can produce an output that looks like C. And then you can have two different components in a model, D and E, which also give C as an output distributions. But what's very important what's not enough is to say you get the right output, because you need to know that there's an infinite number of models that will give a certain output. What you need to know is that, like, are the conditions that you're setting in the model, these A's and B's, and these, well, let's say A and B produces X, right? And then you can also get C and D producing X. What you need to know is which one of these A and B initial conditions or model suppositions are really the driving force behind what the reality is, because the world is full of rubbish models. Yeah, Malik says, to me, the econophysicists have from a distance for some time smelled of statisticians trying to play 3D and 2D when we live in 4+. Yeah. And what is it? The 20 something, is it 15 or 20 something if you're a quantum or superstring theory? There's just lots of very, very small dimensions that we can't see. Anything that says you need a whole load of extra dimensions to make the math work, is interesting, to say the least. Apparently, a lot of this supersymmetry stuff, all this stuff from theoretical physics, this idea of, electrons and selectrons and positrons or protons and sprotons and all these quarks and squarks. I think that's, definitely a selectron. I think I had an S to all of them, that they have these supersymmetry particles that none of these appeared when they did them in the Large Hadron Collider stuff over in Switzerland, when they did the later runs in the last few years, and they were all expecting the energies to be high enough to see them, and nothing appeared. I know a friend of mine, I haven't seen him in years, but he was, last time I met him, he was been in Korea. He was doing supersymmetry theory, and I think there's a lot of depressed supersymmetry theorists out there now, and it all fell on its arse. Right, we're on 50 minutes. Is there anything anybody else wants to talk? I know it's been a bit rambly today. I'd like to do some. It's weird doing these streams on your own. I'm much more somebody who likes buzzing off people. And I think when you only have like 3 or 4 in the chat, I think, like, if you see, like, who's it? Your man, is it Matt Chrisman from Trapo, and he does these live streams. But the dude probably has 2,000 people in the chat, so it's probably like firing him ideas to spring off of all the time, or different things to talk about, and prepare themselves with things that aren't so goddamn tedious as statistical correlations. But hey, busy man. Anything else before we go? Well, I think I'll call it a night then, and I'll see you all. I'm trying to organize so many different interviews at the moment, and so I'm having trouble getting them. I was supposed to have one done already that was supposed to be released as a Patron only episode, which is about my boarding school, my best friend from school. We're going to do a kind of an interesting comedy one, but some full of some of my classic stories. And but he lives in the sticks, and he's after messing up his tablet, and that's all gone awry. So I'm trying to get in touch with him, trying to get it done. And I've got a number. There's a guy doing podcast called Fight Like an Animal. It's he's an anarchist guy who's trying to come to terms with like his political experiences and trying to, as an environmentalist, and trying to look at scientific literature about from what would we say, psychology, neuropsychology, and all this kind of good stuff, and kind of coming up with a material understanding for why people are, say, not conducive to kind of allergic to radical politics on some level and environmentalism, which is definitely interesting. It's kind of like it's quite materialistic, but I think it's like not materialistic enough. And so I hope to have him on the show and to do a couple of episodes, and we can talk about that. So that's one I have in the pipeline as well. And I also have another one about a kind of another one of these models for an economy, like a socialist economy. Unfortunately, the book on it is like £150 or something like that. So I'm trying to get some of it from the author so I can discuss it with him. And I have other stuff. I've one on reactionaries. I'm going to do an episode with Greg Belvedere, who did the one we did on John Michael Greer. So that's also one I planned. So I have a load of these ones in the plan. So loads of things coming up, but I'm just struggling to get the actual interviews organized. So I will be releasing like these Patreon only episodes, but they're going to be, they're taking me longer to get out, not for the want of trying. So hopefully I will release enough to cover the ones that I've missed. I know I'm late for this one already, so that's a bit of a shame. So, Christopher Carroll, ever listen to the Trademark Belfast podcast? No, what's that about? I've never heard of it. Interesting. I like a good podcast. Trademark Belfast podcast. Let's have a check. About us. No idea. What is it? Do you have any idea what it's about, Alex? Or Christopher? Yeah. Well, look. Mandate. I don't know mandate. I'm always extremely wary of words like transition. Because, like, let's be honest, like, there has to be a revolution. There's not going to be some kind of transition. It's not like the capitalist class are going to sit on their hands and go, well, they're peacefully transitioning here. Well, it wouldn't be right to go in and just break it up, like when you see things like, well, I just like the word trademark there. that I don't like as a thing, and just transition. I think I'm very skeptical of such language, I must say. MMT and Marxists generally, so that they're more, when Marxists are MMT types, they're typically Keynesian. That's what I would say. I'm talking here as a person who takes on board the monetary insights of MMT, but like its politics, it's just Keynesianism. Okay, so and the word transition, like, yeah, I'm not a fan of the word transition. Let's see now. What else? There was Steel Toe. How's it going, Steel Toe? We're doing good here. There was something else I was going to say before I go. No, that's it. Look, I'll see you all. I have another episode probably out on Thursday on the Patron. It'll probably be another premiere, and I really want to get these other interviews going, so I'm going to have to get on the phone and crack some heads. Right then, everybody, I'm out of here. The lads who are on the podcast aren't social dems. Yeah, there's also a good brand of Marxist social democrat. Like, who knows? Maybe it's just it's lingo. Maybe it's just trying to get a few green people in the door, try and trick them in. But like, fair enough. I will check it out. But I'm just giving my instinct, just my 2 cents straight off the bat with no knowledge whatsoever. Okay. Maybe I'm immune to the way you love me all the time. Right. Let's get out of here.